This is KGUA Walala 88.3 FM. Coming up next on Peggy's Place, we are simulcasting on YouTube day 2 of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, right after a word from our sponsor.
The Seabiscuit Therapeutic Writing Center at Ridgewood Ranch in Willits is hosting a virtual auction November 6th to the 9th for their annual fundraiser, Claws for a Good Cause. Since it began in the late 90s at the home of Seabiscuit, this horse healing program has helped teach the skill of writing to numerous children and U.S. veterans with special disabilities, from autism to cerebral palsy to PTSD. And the added benefit of horse movement, coordination, and personal awareness helps develop skills and strength in their daily lives. The benefit auction contains some amazing items: lobster dinner for 4 delivered to you, a 2-night stay in Mendocino, and an antique saddle owned by Charles Howard, used by Noor, Seabiscuit's stablemate, among other unique items. Proceeds support the ongoing efforts of the STRC team at Ridgewood Ranch. To participate before and during the auction, November 6th through 9th, search online for STRC Join Me. That's STRC for Seabiscuit Therapeutic Writing Center Join Me. That's Claws for a Cause, an online benefit auction this November 6th through the 9th. Sponsors include the Frank R. Howard Foundation.
Welcome to Peggy's Place. I'm Leanne Lindsay, host and producer of Day 2 of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, a special simulcast to YouTube this week brought to you by Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study and KGUA Public Media. We are located in South Mendocino County on the Pacific Ocean in the town of Walala, right across the bridge from Sonoma County in California. You can watch on KGUA's YouTube channel and listen at 88.3 FM locally. And at KGUA.org, we are streaming worldwide, and we are also on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn. Today, we'll continue to hear about the status of our oceans and the life forms which inhabit them. Our speakers going forward include Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's Long, and the University of Redlands' Tessa Foster, Noyo Center for Marine Sciences' Sarah Grimes, Blue Planet Strategies' Zach Cliver. Today's guests are the Ocean Foundation's Richard Charter, Ocean Conservation's Research's Michael Stocker, and the University of New Hampshire's Carter Mercer, Scott's nephew, who I believe just joined us, and I need to admit him in. I think he has already admitted in. And so we are going to now go to our first guest, which is Richard Charter, a senior fellow with the Ocean Foundation, where he has worked to ensure the protection of fragile marine ecosystems and sensitive coastlines for over 4 decades. He worked to protect the Atlantic and Pacific coasts and Bristol Bay in Alaska, in addition to securing a separate law protecting the Gulf Coast and Panhandle of Florida from the new offshore oil and gas leasing, at least until 2022. He presently serves on the Greater Farallones Sanctuary Advisory Council and has also served as the U.S. Department of Energy's Methane Hydrates Advisory Committee. He is currently working to protect existing marine sanctuary boundaries under review by the present Secretary of Commerce and to prevent the Trump administration from opening the Arctic Ocean, the California coast, and the Atlantic coast to offshore drilling. He will talk to us today about being one with nature and defending our planet during a time of broken promises. Welcome, Richard, to the Ocean Life Symposium.
Thank you very much. We're lucky to live in a place that's largely defined by what has not happened here because we didn't let it. Today, I'd like to celebrate a small grassroots movement that began on the Sonoma-Mendocino coast. And then it became an environmental protection movement for the coast nationwide and eventually globally. we have had a number of threats here on the Sonoma coast, and they really began with the introduction of a project called Lease Sale 53 by then Interior Secretary Cecil Andrus in 1977, who worked for Jimmy Carter. He was looking to have offshore drilling along the Sonoma Mendocino coast, starting just 3 miles out. State waters extend 3 miles from shore, and the high interest tracts were delineated in either checkerboard or yellow. And we looked at this map, and we all remembered the 1969 Santa Barbara blowout very clearly. And we realized that it could easily happen here. Oregon had the same experience, and they had had some exploratory drilling for test holes back as far as 1964 along both the Oregon coast and the Washington coast. And so a congressman from Oregon, Congressman Les Coyne, got together with a congressman from Massachusetts named Silvio Conte, and they got together with our local officials and our citizens and invented in 1981 calendar year for the fiscal year 1982 Interior Appropriations Bill, a ban on funding for the Interior Department so that they couldn't spend money on leasing here. And that became as the Congressional Outer Continental Shelf Moratorium. There were a lot of us, just like there are a lot of birds today on the Farallone Islands. And it began with Oregon, California, and Massachusetts, but we all set a precedent for using our grassroots connection to our local officials and our connection to our state elected officials. And then we went to Congress, and I didn't know my way around Congress at all. I was lost in the congressional office buildings for the first 3 days I was there. But we quickly learned that the entire outer continental shelf of the US, not only the West Coast, but the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, and Alaska, was eventually going to be open to offshore drilling. And then we managed to renew for 27 years, 1 year at a time, this congressional protection. It was not always easy. It sometimes passed by a single vote margin each year in the House Appropriations Committee. But the key thing about it that we need to remember, I think, most today is that it was always bipartisan. The Democrats and the Republicans got together and saved their coasts. And that 27-year annual moratorium in Congress extended until 2009, when the second George Bush left office. And then the whole coast was open, theoretically. But of course, President Obama did not start efforts to drill in those previously protected areas. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon accident happened in the Gulf of Mexico. I was awakened at 3 a.m. by a phone call saying there was a very large rig on fire in the Gulf. And the first call I made was to see where the loop currents were going, because I knew this had the capacity to be a unprecedented disaster. It did turn out to be the largest offshore oil spill in the history of the world. And the oil industry's response was to try to dump a substance called Corexit onto the spill and into the plume at the bottom of the ocean to try to get it out of the media. But in fact, that just put an aerosol of Corexit into the atmosphere, into the clouds along the coast, and exposed literally hundreds of thousands of people in communities along the coast to Corexit. And then the workers offshore who were trying to respond to that spill were also exposed to a mixture of Corexit and oil, which is even worse. Corexit causes oil to transpose through the cell barrier. And a lot of those people are still sick today. President Trump came along and he decided that he would open all of America's outer continental shelf in what he called the America First energy policy. And he began with the South Atlantic, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico on both sides of Florida, which didn't go over particularly well. And citizens there and their local elected officials, 100 cities and localities, county commissioner groups passed resolutions opposing Atlantic coast offshore drilling. And he left out the North Atlantic only because I think he felt that that was too big a bite. But he began a process that would lead eventually to seismic testing, or so he hoped, to gather data to support the lease sale. And the seismic testing itself, because the citizens saw it as a precursor to offshore drilling, became just as controversial as the drilling itself. So the logo that began here on the Sonoma-Mendocino coast got a few waves in front of it and became the basis of a movement along the Florida coast, the Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia coast, and New Jersey to stop offshore drilling there. The President Trump, if nothing else, wanted to be reelected in Florida. And when the Florida newspapers began to predict that he would lose Florida if he tried to drill off of Florida, about 6 weeks ago, he announced that he was removing both the West Coast and the Atlantic coast of Florida from his offshore drilling plan. He was removing Georgia. He was removing South Carolina. He was removing those states so that he could help Senate races in those states, and so he could help his own chances. He later, about a week later, went on to claim that he was also removing from his drilling plan North Carolina, and he went up to Virginia and announced he was going to not drill off of Virginia, although that has not yet been put into any document yet. The real focus, of course, remains Alaska. Just about every sensitive part of Alaska, except for Bristol Bay, the richest sockeye salmon fishery on the planet, which we were able to permanently protect, remains in his offshore drilling plan. And of course, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, the largest wilderness in America, still remains the target of the Trump administration. That is not going over well as we go into the presidential election. Obviously, the future of the entire U.S. coastline is all dependent on who's in office in the White House. And at this point, we're not even sure that the areas that the president promised he would protect are actually really protected. So we're facing here in Northern California lease sales in 2021 and 2023. And in Central California, same thing, 2021 and 2023. A total of 6 lease sales off California that will be green-lighted about 3 weeks after the November presidential election, no matter who wins. Now, obviously, who wins depends on whether those go ahead. Oregon and Washington are also in that mix. And so what we have here is what we worked for a matter of 40 years, which is protection from offshore drilling, extending throughout really from Cambria up to just north of Point Arena in the Monterey Bay, Greater Farallones, Cordell Bank, National Marine Sanctuaries, and even the Greater Farallones Sanctuary is still under review by Secretary Trump's Secretary of Commerce. So stay tuned, join in. This is a half-finished project. Saving this coast happens one day at a time. Peter Douglas, the former executive director of the Coastal Commission, said that our coast is never saved. It's always in the process of being saved. And I invite all of you to join us in continuing that process. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Richard Charter of the Ocean Foundation. We really appreciate all your tireless efforts to protect all of our oceans and the inhabitants in them. So coming up next, we have another guest speaker that we will introduce in just a moment. I just wanted to remind everybody that you are listening to KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are live on YouTube at our YouTube channel, and we are talking about the status of our oceans and the life forms in them. You can catch us on the stream as well at kgua.org and also on apps Radio Garden and Tune In. And we are now going to talk to, if I can get my notes down here. Let's see, hang on just one moment. Just an issue with the mouse. Okay, here we go. This is Peggy's Place. Just to remind everybody, I'm your host, Leanne Lindsay, and our next speaker is Michael Stocker, who is the founding director of Ocean Conservation Research, a science and policy development NGO focused on the impacts of human-generated noise on marine habitat. He has written and spoken about ocean bioacoustics since 1992, presenting in regional, national, and international hearings, television, radio, news publications, and in museums, schools, and universities. His understanding of both physics and biology has proven invaluable in court testimony and legal briefs, defending the environment against the dangers of human-generated noise in the sea. His topic today is What Was That Sound? Acoustical adaptations to the ocean's dark and wet environment. Welcome, Michael, to the Ocean Life Symposium.
Okay. Thanks, Leanne. Appreciate it. Gotta find my screen here.
And you may have a little slow internet, so we're getting a little bit of a fade out, but hopefully it'll stabilize.
Not okay. I'm trying to get video. My PowerPoint up. Thank you. We really appreciate you pulling this together here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about adaptations and a little bit about effects people who we are right now. Yeah, everything is. So this is kind of a guessing game as much as anything else. And I think we didn't actually try to that, and no, didn't do that very well from my laptops. Hopefully, get that. It's going to be more like a guessing game. So a lot of adaptations. The ocean is more of an acoustic environment than it is visual environment because it's dark and light really has to.
Michael, I need to just interrupt for a moment. Your internet seems to be very slow. Could you call in? Call in at 707-884-4883, if you would.
Okay.
And we are going to then continue to watch your presentation. Have you call in?
Okay.
We can't hear you.
I'm unmuted. Hello?
Okay, it seems like your internet may have stabilized a little bit, but it was fading out. It was very difficult.
Let's try that. I had some equipment plugged into it, so let me work with this. Okay.
But much better.
So as I was saying, the ocean is an acoustic environment more than a visual. Very deeply in the ocean and very far, particularly in waters that are full of life. So pretty much every animal in the ocean, including invertebrates and fish and what have you, are all using the ocean as an acoustic channel. And they've adapted in a lot of different ways. There's a thing that we use in bioacoustics called acoustic niches. And that is that animals will choose a little niche, a sound niche that's appropriate to their need to transmit sound, their need to resolve their surroundings. And so we have a broad range of animal sounds from the lowest, largest animals that have ever been on the planet, the blue whale, which will communicate down at 4 hertz, to rubber quizzes, which will communicate to 200 kilohertz. And they all have different resolutions. Actually, there's evidence that the blue whales, we'll get into that sector. So this is the sounds that we hear from the play the sound.
Okay, Michael is going to call in, and we are going to use his audio from the phone call in addition to what we are seeing on Zoom. And is he there? No. Okay, please call in. And I just sent you the telephone number, Michael. And we'll get this cleared up, and we'll get better audio for you, especially since you are a specialist in audio.
Well, what? Okay.
It's just one of those things. We all deal with it.
Actually, he just sent you the phone number, right?
Could you call in on your cell, or can you call in on a cell or a landline? Okay,
No, do we have a number?
I can call it if you get the phone.
You need to call in because we cannot hear you. I'm sorry, Michael. You're going to have to call in on a landline or a cell phone. Okay, what's that? Yes. Can you call in on a phone? Because we can't hear you. All right.
I can call in. I just need the number.
The telephone number is there in the chat box, 707-884-4883. That's 884-4883, area code 707.
Okay, hold on.
And just hang on, audience. We're getting Michael's
707-884.
Here we go. All right, Michael.
Okay, I need to get you because we're having an echo.
Yes, mute on Zoom. Okay.
Okay, I need to get you. We're having.
And okay, he's got his audio. Do you have
Headphones or something?
you have your headphones on, correct? Can you turn your computer audio off? Okay. All right, folks, we are all learning how to do our first Zoom to YouTube presentation. Yes, and you are listening to the Ocean Life Symposium Day 2, and this is Michael Stockert. And for some reason, I'm still getting feedback. You're going to have to take it a little further. Okay, so we're going to have you see if you can. Okay, so this is the founding director of Ocean Conservation Research, a science and policy development NGO, Michael Stockert. Here we go.
All righty-o. Let's see if I can get the share screen up here. Hold on. All right, we're here. That one there. I'm sorry, Leanne. I'm a bad show person here.
Yeah.
I need to hear you. A disaster.
Yeah, let's see.
I need to hear you on the phone as well, Leanne. I can't hear you on the phone.
Just go ahead and do your presentation.
Now I've got it. Okay, from the beginning. Share screen. Good. Okay. As I was saying, I'm just going to play some sound. Why don't you play that first sound, Leanne? We'll just, we'll get back into the acoustic part of this.
You got it.
decided, you know what? There's no way I can make a presentation that I can't hear being an acoustics guy.
Oh, okay. Well, we just played the shrimp, the first one.
I'm gonna acquiesce to Teresa. You guys can carry on. This is a total disaster. I can't hear anything. We're not giving a presentation that's really worthy of the topic to your audience. So we're gonna have to basically punt on this one here, and let's hand it over to Teresa.
Okay, well, hang on just one minute. Thank you, Michael Stocker, for at least trying to work with us today. We all know that there is always a chance for the internet not to be working, and we appreciate having him try and attempt to update us on how noises in the ocean affect the inhabitants within. And we now will transition onwards to our next guest, which is Carter Mercer. And just a moment here, I'm going to now, he's with the University of New Hampshire, and I'm trying to now find the information on him since we are moving forward. You can watch us on our new YouTube TV channel, that's KGUA's channel, and on KGUA's Air Pocket app. You can listen in online as well as Radio Garden and tune in. This is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. I'm Leanne Lindsay, your host, and this is Peggy's Place. Up next is our speaker, who is Scott's nephew, Carter Mercer, who is currently enrolled in a Master's of Science in Business Analytics at the University of New Hampshire, where he has a position as a research assistant. His current area of research is to draw insights about people's behavior from data. In the past, he has done research on the effect of real estate prices as a response to distance from the water and elevation, which will be affected by future sea level rise. The ultimate goal of this project and an objective of his is to motivate policymakers to become proactive to climate change and become resilient in areas affected from sea level rise. In general, we can increase awareness to the effects that humans have on the environment and create a better world. Welcome, Carter, to our Ocean Life Symposium, and hopefully things will go better with you.
Hello, everybody. I'll just share my PowerPoint here.
You've got some great audio.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. And it was interesting to hear the first couple of speakers, even though the second one kind of dropped out early. But interesting topics here. My topic's a little bit different, as it's not directly related to the ecological ocean factors and things like that. It's more on the business side here. We're estimating the housing market response to sea level rise. This is a project I worked on with a couple of professors, Cameron Wake, who has done a lot of research on climate change, particularly in New Hampshire and how sea level rise is affecting New Hampshire. And also a statistical researcher, Christopher Glynn, who's done a lot of interesting work. So why is this relevant to this symposium here? Well, we want to draw more attention to climate change, and perhaps from a different perspective, since we're looking at this from more of the business side of things. And we can become more proactive against the effects of a warming planet, such as sea level rise. And ultimately, a goal would be to influence our policymakers to write legislation that can be proactive to climate change and also more resilient to things such as sea level rise, as they are coming in the future. So the motivating question here that we really wanted to look at is, you can see clearly from the picture that there's two homes, and they're both pretty much the same distance from the ocean, and they're both flooded. But are two similar homes with different elevations priced differently? In theory, the one higher off the water should be priced differently because it's more resilient to coastal flooding. So this is the motivating question here that we're going to look at. So what are we doing? Again, we're estimating the expected price of a home And this is per square foot. We didn't control for homes characteristics as well as we would have liked to, but this does a relatively good job of doing that. And we're going to estimate this using the home's distance from the water and its elevation. The data comes from 2009 through 2018. Why are we doing this? We just want to know if homes at higher elevations are being priced higher relative to homes at low elevations. And this is taking place in Seacoast, New Hampshire, specifically Portsmouth, Hampton, and Seabrook. And we're going to estimate this function using a Bayesian non-parametric regression model. And you'll see how this works in just a minute. So the background specifically for this sample is the Gulf of Maine has been warming at 7 times the global average, which is something I didn't know before starting this research project. And it's really interesting to note that it's one of the fastest warming bodies of water in the world. So a large part of the sea level rise is attributed to the expansion of seawater. As it warms, it expands more. And finally, these coastal communities in Seacoast, New Hampshire are at significant risk due to sea level rise and coastal flooding. So the data comes from Zillow. They have data publicly available for academic research. And also University of New Hampshire was a lot of help in getting data to add to the Z-Trax database that included elevation and distance from the water, which was obtained with LiDAR. So to ensure quality of the data for a home's elevation, you can see the purple dots in the right picture. We tried to make sure they were as close to the front doorstep as possible to ensure that a home's elevation was accurate to fairly run this model with a home's elevation. And like, for example, if a home was on a hill and the coordinates we get from Zillow's database aren't always in the center of the home or on the front doorstep. So if a home's on a hill, the coordinate might be in the backyard, and that might be much lower than the actual elevation of the home. So we wanted to make sure that was accurate there. And this is a good visual for kind of showing this area of New Hampshire. UNH has done a lot of work in estimating sea level rise in different scenarios, such as storm surge and different levels of sea level rise. In particular, we chose to look at areas affected by 6-foot sea level rise, which can be seen in the blue shaded region. And all of those orange points are the homes and the structures that are included in this study. So as you can see, Hampton has the highest median price per square foot. It's also the closest to the water, and also has, in general, the lowest elevation. But there's a challenge with all of this. Inherently, with real estate data, it's really noisy. There's a lot of variance in the transactions of a home. And we need to expect this expected market price per square foot over a surface. It's going to be a function to estimate this using the home's first finished floor elevation and its distance from the ocean. So this is the mathematical technique used here, and I won't get too into it, but essentially we have our data, and this process comes up with a certain belief of what kind of functions could help map this data. And then as you get more data, it actually creates a pretty good prediction of what you want to estimate up to infinite variables. In this case, we only have 2 variables, which is distance from the water and elevation. And you'll see what my function actually looks like. This is just from the textbook. So again, this function is the main takeaway of this study. The left-hand side of the equation would be a way to control for a home's common characteristics, such as number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. But we did price per square foot, which actually does a pretty good job of controlling for that. And if you're interested in the statistical part of this function is Gaussian process with parameters mean zero and covariance sigma, which helps estimate this function. So this is actually what the surface looks like. And as you can see, and as expected, distance from the water is really the key indicator of a home's price. As you're closer to the water, it's more appealing to live there. And I want you to ignore this drop off here. That's just the function doing what it's supposed to do. But theoretically, that would be homes that are placed in the ocean, so that those wouldn't exist in the data set. But as you can see, at any distance from the water, it's really flat. The FFE, the first finished floor elevation, doesn't actually really change the home's price. So New Hampshire buyers aren't yet putting a premium on a higher elevation, which we thought might have been the case originally. But what's next? It'd be nice to extend the study, maybe go up the Maine coastline or down into the Massachusetts coastline, and even come up with a way to cluster certain geographical locations that have similar characteristics and see if that changes anything. We can certainly make improvements to the methods. I worked on this project a couple years ago, and I've learned a lot more since then. We didn't include a time component to this. We need more work controlling for the home itself. But overall, it's a really cool way to estimate and extend to possible different areas of the United States. And just continue to create awareness about climate change and the well-being of the environment. And I think this project is different from some of the other presentations you might see at the symposium, but it's just another way to create more awareness about everything. So I want to thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. If you want to connect via email or LinkedIn, I'd be happy to do so as well. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Carter. We really appreciate that information. And thank you for being with us today. That was Carter Mercer, a research assistant at the University of New Hampshire. And again, as he mentioned, you can reach Carter at cartermercer44@gmail.com. And this is Leanne Lindsay. You're listening to Peggy's Place, a special week-long symposium called the Ocean Life Symposium that we are doing here at KGUA in Wallala. And we are going to now switch things up just a little bit, as we did have some technical difficulties. And now I have verbal difficulties, technical difficulties with Michael Stalker. And we are now going to have Richard back with us as he was talking, Richard Charter of the Ocean Foundation, and he's going to be talking with Scott Mercer to give us some more information about our oceans. Welcome back, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Richard.
Okay, and now we've got Scott Mercer.
Hello, Richard.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. So thank you for being here. That's that view behind you. Is that your living room window?
Oh, well, yes, it's actually was taken outdoors, but basically I've been stuck here trapped for 40 years.
I did have a question. There was a question posed to me yesterday about DDT that may be coming off of, well, first of all, there is no current use of DDT out on the Catalina Island, is there?
Not currently DDT in California. I think the thing that this is just a breaking story, so I have not gotten into the details of it. But as you know, and I think everybody realizes, the ocean used to be viewed as a dump site. And when they went to do offshore drilling exploration with seismic testing off the Atlantic coast, they discovered a lot of unexploded bombs were out there, and they didn't know where they all were. And just a couple of weeks ago, one of them actually washed up on the beach in the Carolinas. Here, there was DDT manufactured in Southern California. It became entrained in the seabed sediments, and was the subject of, I think, just about the longest running lawsuit in the history of California to try to decide whether it was smarter to leave the entrained DDT that had come out through a waste pipe, leave it in the seabed, or try to extract it and then sort of resuspended in the water column. So these are tough decisions. Off of Catalina, it looks like this was just dumped DDT.
Oh, okay. Dumped in containers, which are now rusting.
Well, again, I haven't had a chance to check. If it was dumped in containers, we know that even right next to the Farallones, there was radioactive waste dumped at one time in containers, barrels that are rusting. So what they're finding off of Catalina, as I say, this was a story that I saw very early this morning, and I haven't, I'm sure when I get off air, I can look at some news on it, but it doesn't surprise me. Off the California coast, in fact, off the coast of almost any state, you can find an offshore chemical dump site.
Right. That's been a problem on Stellwagen Bank in Massachusetts Bay.
Exactly. And
Quite a while.
the interesting thing to me, I follow it because it tends to indicate this is not a good place for offshore drilling.
Oh, absolutely. Could you give us a follow-up on what may be going on now at the Farallones in terms of the rodent control? Is there any update on that?
Well, there has been a proposal on the desk of the Farallones Sanctuary and the Farallones Sanctuary Advisory Council that I serve on. Our Sanctuary Council passed a resolution about it back in January at our last in-person meeting. We had expected this to go to the California Coast Commission at their November meeting. What this is all about is in about the year late 1500s sometime, we think, the first European settlers, explorers sent a crew ashore on the Farallones to club seals and steal seabird eggs. And in the course of that, some house mice got let loose on the Farallone Islands. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wants to drop 1.5 tons of a cereal bait laced with a second generation anticoagulant rodenticide called brodifacoum from helicopters onto the southeast Farallone Islands. Not necessarily their purpose, stated purpose is to kill all the mice. But what's causing the damage is not the mice so much as there are about 8 burrowing owls that commute out to the Farallones from probably the Marin headlands, and the burrowing owls go out to the Farallones to eat the mice, but the mouse population spikes suddenly and then drops, and the owls stick around and predate on the eggs and chicks of a very interesting little seabird called the ashy storm petrel. Actually, the thing that threatens the ashy storm petrel would be offshore oil drilling platforms and oil spills. But this has become kind of a hot button issue because the Farallones Sanctuary itself has the most protected waters on the planet. You cannot, it has a regulation called enter and injure, where if a substance enters sanctuary waters and changes the ecology in any way, it doesn't even have to be damage, that's illegal. So something like the poison drop on the southeast Farallones not only would, undermine the whole regulatory structure of this and all other sanctuaries in terms of a bad precedent, but it turns out that the poison in question itself is, it was just outlawed by the state of California. The governor about 3 weeks ago signed a bill from the state legislature that outlaws the use of second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, including brodifacoum, anywhere on land in California. But in the case of the Farallones, that law will not apply. It takes effect in January. So Fish and Wildlife is still pushing their plan, still wants to drop poison on the Farallones. Within Fish and Wildlife, the disagreement is whether it will kill 1,000 or 4,000 Western gulls, some of which will wash ashore on the mainland here and have to be treated as hazmat. And that, we believe now, will come before the California Coast Commission at either their January or February 2021 meeting.
Okay, thank you for that update. I've been also wondering what the status of the proposed windmills that you had mentioned a while back from the Northern California coast, I believe, down to Big Sur. Yeah, that would be right along the area where gray whales migrate through.
The same agency that is still trying to lease our coast right here, sanctuary or no, for offshore drilling, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, used to be the Bureau of Land Management, BOEM, we call it, they are holding lease sales actively in the two areas off the California coast that have what is called a reasonably high wind energy density. One of those is at the south end of Big Sur off of Morro Bay. Some of those areas of lease interest are inside of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. And of course, that would be another bad precedent of allowing industrial activity within a sanctuary. Some of them are just outside and basically surround the southern end of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. And these would be floating offshore wind devices on a platform not unlike the Deepwater Horizon. They're called floaters. They're built by the oil industry. They have a supply chain from the oil industry. So the primary areas of interest are off of the southern end of Big Sur and then off of Humboldt County. Humboldt County has probably the best wind energy density for this purpose, but there's no wiring out of there. There's absolutely the cost of building overland transmission lines to get electrical energy generated off of Humboldt County into a power grid in the Bay Area where the demand is. I mean, you can only power so many grow houses in Humboldt County with offshore wind. So you need to get a cable to the Bay Area. And I've been in conferences with the wind energy industry where they talk about a cable that would come down offshore the Mendocino coast, offshore the Sonoma coast. They can't take it into San Francisco Bay, Golden Gate. So it would have to come ashore somewhere like Bodega Bay or up Tomales Bay to get to. So we're watching that carefully because there are environmental issues with subsea cables, we know from past experience. And meanwhile, floating offshore wind has been basically infiltrated by the offshore oil and gas industry to the point where a company called Statoil, one of the largest offshore drilling companies on the planet, has changed their name to be more ecologically interesting and call themselves Equinor. And they are likely to be the bidder on the most promising tracks, both off of Humboldt and off of Big Sur. So once the oil industry's in, they're kind of in and they gather data. And so our concern is that as much as offshore floating wind might offer a low carbon electrical source, it brings with it the oil industry itself. And you mentioned the interaction with cetaceans and floating offshore wind. Well, if you picture a floating rig, kind of like, as I mentioned, the Deepwater Horizon, anchored to the seabed by at least 3, possibly as many as 5 big steel cables about the size of your arm. I mean, these are big cables. Anchored to vertically to the seabed and then draped between the various platforms, floating platforms, an electrical cable, and then floating offshore substations like a switching yard kind of on land, only on a barge. You wind up with something, if you get enough of these floating offshore wind machines, you wind up with something that resembles pretty closely a chain link fence for whales. So there are interactions of concern with floating offshore wind having to do with the audio signal from these things as they operate. They send a sound through the water. Interactions with the cables and whales, who are not likely to be accustomed to running into large steel cables, especially if they hit them at the right angle. It's almost like a ship strike with a propeller. And also certain birds, birds that tend to land on the water around bait balls off the north coast. And of course, the commercial fishing industry is watching all of this with great care because they're worried about the space use conflict of losing some of their most productive fishing grounds to closures around and on top of what will become offshore floating wind farms.
Right. Well, concern with all that racket would be late April, May, and into June. We have, as you know, the gray whale mothers with calves coming back up the coast, and they migrate fairly close at times. And extra noise like that can cause the mothers and calves to become separated, not be able to find each other acoustically because they're being drowned out. So that's a concern right there too. Plus there's blockades of cables and the platforms themselves. Do you know if the industry, whether it's for oil or platforms like that, any type of platform, would need to do more seismic work here, or has this whole area been surveyed previously?
Well, the wind industry wants to do shallow seismic. In other words, they don't need to understand the seabed geology to as deep a horizon in the ground as does the oil industry. But actually, I was in a very alarming meeting a few years ago in Sacramento, and Statoil, the primary wind developer, was there, and they said, while we have our seismic ship there, maybe we should look for oil. And this was a room full of wind developers and conservationists, and the room got very quiet for about 90 seconds. Because the fact is that although the wind energy industry, they're looking to site cable lays, they're looking to site very large anchors made of concrete and steel, they need to understand the seabed, not as much as the piling-based wind energy industry on the Atlantic coast, but they need to understand the seabed. And some of that data, even grab samples of the sediments, can be useful in later locating oil or gas. So everybody's watching this very carefully. Of course, California wants to be energy independent in carbon or low carbon technologies, and that's a big priority under our state law and our state policies. So you kind of have a conflict here where climate warming, the ocean has already paid a price, obviously, by absorbing a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. Now the ocean's being asked to be part of the solution for generating electricity. How that happens is going to require great care. And studies about, the sound impacts, as you mentioned, separating mothers from calves in the cetacean world, and also the entanglement issue, which of course is a huge issue this year, even over crab lines, let alone these giant cables with the floating wind. It's I think a challenging time for science to be involved in making sure that some of the things that are being done in the name of addressing climate warming, climate chaos, that's important, but we can't just throw the ocean under the bus in the process.
Right, absolutely. There's a 3-day consortium going on, being led by the New England Aquarium on the East Coast right now, of addressing right whales and entanglements and ship strikes. And tomorrow, a friend of ours, Zach Cliver, is on Thursday, will be addressing ropeless gear. He'll be talking first of all right whales, and then he'll be segueing into talking about ropeless gear. Okay, I had a presentation put together here to show in town a couple of years ago about the dangers of seismic activity from everything from zooplankton up to marine mammals. That's why I was asking if that was still a relevant topic, because I've been told that the surveys have been done out here already seismically for looking for oil many years ago, but I didn't know if with new technology, if they were going to want to update that.
Many years ago, as I showed in one of my PowerPoint slides and mentioned, off of Oregon and Northern California, there were two-dimensional seismic surveys done, like in the 1960s. They were not high resolution. The data was not, we didn't have the computing power, supercomputers or the analog apps to analyze it. But the interest areas that have attracted the oil and gas drillers to the Northern California coast are pretty well defined, as they are off of Oregon. The question is, in my mind, as the wind energy industry is granted entry to do shallower geophysical testing to understand the seabed for the purposes of offshore wind, will that give them tempting data about that could lead them to then increase the pressure, depending on who's president? Obviously, the current president changes his mind a lot. Would that give the wind energy in many cases, the same players as the oil industry. Would it give them an increased interest in oil and gas drilling here? And that's just part of it, but it's an important part of it, because if it's the the camel's nose under the tent, this is a very large camel when you have an oil industry operation off of Humboldt County. Even if it's just generating electricity for now, it may get other ideas.
Right. Work that was done, excuse me, off Australia by the University of Tanzania had shown that, I'm sorry, not Tanzania, Tasmania, oh, never mind, showed that the seismic work was being, was actually blasting holes in zooplankton communities, and was also affecting some of the fisheries, and right down to scallop beds. And so there'd be a concern out here, because it does impact the food chain from the invertebrate, from zooplankton, which is fed on by just about everything, right on up to the marine mammals and seabirds. So that's why I was wondering about that, whether or not with new technology, if they're going to be wanting to survey again out here.
Yes, they will, and that's a very good question. In the course of the 3 or 4 year debate that's been going on off of the mid and South Atlantic coasts as a preparation for offshore drilling off the Carolinas, Georgia, and the Atlantic coast of Florida, as I mentioned earlier, the fight has been really initially over seismic testing, which is viewed as a precursor to offshore drilling. And so once that data is in a computer, and I've actually been in these large facilities in Texas, in Houston, they have Western Geo as, of course, one of the committees I'm on. I watch data be analyzed on a screen. Once they understand the seabed, they know where they could place a wind farm, but they also know where they want to drill for oil and gas. They've now gotten to the point where they can identify frozen natural gas in the form of methane hydrates in a more sophisticated way. So the bottom of the ocean, the seabed, is probably the new frontier. We're even seeing proposals for subsea mining. So the ocean, we're not done protecting the ocean, and I'm hoping the next generation of coastal conservationists will take up some of the issues that still threaten our oceans in very real ways, including offshore drilling right here.
Right, that is the University of Tasmania. I hadn't looked at it in a couple of years. I didn't sound right when I said it. It was researchers from the University of Tasmania who did a lot of work off the coast of Australia with the seismic testing and the air guns. Well, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And thanks to both of you. We really appreciate having you back on, Richard Charter of the Ocean Foundation, and also Scott Mercer of the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study, which is co-producing this event. Thank you all for joining us today for the second day of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, brought to you by, again, Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study and KGUA Public Media in Wallala. We're located at the junction of both Mendocino and Sonoma Coast, and simulcasting the Zoom symposium on our YouTube channel and sharing to our Facebook and Instagram pages. And stay tuned for the rest of the week for more of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium on Peggy's Place. Tomorrow, it's the University of the Redlands Tessa Foster, Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's Marianne Long, and Toyon Research Corporation's Christina Tombach-Wright. They will talk about the effects of warming waters on marine mammals in the Southern California Bight, how awareness inspires conservation, and emerging technologies for mammal research. The last day of the symposium, it's the Noyo Center for Marine Sciences' Sarah Grimes, who will talk to us about what or who has washed ashore in 2020. Blue Planet Strategies' Zach Cliver will give us two presentations, one on the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale and another on the pursuit for ropeless fishing for lobster and crab. You have been listening to KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM, streaming around the world at kgua.org. And we are going to be doing a repeat of this today, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And again, we do apologize for the technical issues earlier that our speaker had with his internet, but we did really appreciate having Richard Charter come back on with Scott Mercer. And now in just a few seconds, we are going to go to Native America Calling, and I'm going to play one of the speaker who could not finish with us, and that was Michael. And that's going to be one of the sounds of the shrimp that's coming up, and then we're going to go into Native America Calling.
Vibe where fear and adrenaline rule. Some Indigenous artists draw from real-life Native horrors like genocide and boarding schools. Others work up totally fictional environments. Join us as we visit with some Indigenous horror makers right after the news.
And that is Native America Calling. This is KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM.